Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome.
Hi, what's up?
I'm here with our special guest, Mark Groves.
I do feel special. I hear that there's a lot of action in this group, and so excited to be able to share in the action.
Love it. So go ahead and share in the comments where you're calling in from and your name so we can see. Let us know who all is here. We'll wait a few minutes and then we'll get started. Let us know any highlights from your weekend so far. Lisa, welcome.
What's up? Hi.
Okay. Any highlights from your weekend so far?
I mean, last night was a highlight.
Yeah.
It was a fun event. Got
Yeah.
to meet lots of awesome people.
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, great host.
Beautiful hosts.
My gosh, the sun came out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty great.
Yeah.
I love it. What about you?
I really liked Alexandra's comment. She was talking about moments when she felt triggered about her son who has some learning disabilities. And she was talking about how when you're in a relationship and you get triggered, it's not just about your stuff, it's about how your partner gets triggered. And she has this conscious practice where when she feels triggered, she takes a pause and says, "That's not my truth, that's my trauma."
Yeah,
and I thought
love
that
that
was
line.
cool.
Yeah, I love that line.
That was my big takeaway. So, hey, Andrew, Chapel Hill,
Good
beautiful.
morning.
Dawn,
Oh,
Karina.
Dawn. Hi, Dawn. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, you met Dawn last night, I think, maybe?
Did we meet, Dawn?
I think you did.
I think we did meet.
Yeah.
Oh, we did meet.
Yeah. So I love it. Okay, well, we'll get started. There are going to be a lot of folks who are watching this on the replay from around the world. So
hi, everybody around the world.
Hey, international
What
friends.
a cool thing we can do this. Isn't this so awesome?
It's really nice.
I know. We're on a computer in a hotel room. This is pretty neat.
Okay, so.
And an honor to be here. Thank you for watching this. If you're watching this,
yeah.
One thing you can't get back is time. So
it's
honored to have that exchanged.
And really all of this started because a couple of men in the group had messaged me wanting information about your courses. And then we connected and decided to make this happen.
And then we met in a cellular real life experience yesterday.
That's right. Yeah, we were at a yoga, meditation, and talk event.
What a combination.
It's actually a great combination for me.
Yeah. A little movement, a little meditation, get present.
Yeah.
Speak the heart.
I love it. Okay, so I wanted to start with, it's a defining moment that you talk about often. We're on the eve of your engagement and you're having some feelings in your body that it's not the right move for you. And so you're engaging with an online forum and there's a woman who asks you 3 pivotal questions.
Oh yeah, those were good ones.
So before I dive into the questions, I was curious what the forum was.
It was a website that no longer exists, unfortunately, because man, I wish I could actually, because you know how often our memory is, I think something like 50% of our memories are actually quite flawed, you know, and I wonder just how, like the actual, if I could fact check myself, you know, I do remember writing on the forum and getting these questions because they shifted me completely. I just would love to see how I told the story, you know, then through that eyes of someone who didn't know the answer and was terrified. It was called The Runaway Bride, the website.
I love it.
Yeah, and it was started by a woman who had left a relationship, and then it became sort of a support forum for people who were unsure or were in marriages they were unsure about. And yeah, all the people on the forum, what I loved about it is they were people who didn't care what I chose. And that was so different than asking for advice from someone who might be affected by your choice. Even though unconsciously they think they're giving you great advice, but if it is going to affect their life, they're going to often give you advice that is going to minimize or reduce the impact on themselves. Which is not, it still comes from love. It's just not helpful when you're trying to figure your shit out.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone here can really relate.
Yeah, that's where I wrote my story. And then it was so beautiful to be held by people I had there were no pictures or anything. It was just verbal, everything.
So have you ever connected with that woman? And
no idea.
Okay.
I tried to go back to the forum just to like capture my story. Like, how did I write it? But it's been gone. By the time I thought about that, it was probably long gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the reason I wanted to bring that up is, so knowing Mark 2019, obviously there have been many iterations of Mark.
Yeah, there have.
But Mark 2019, so the very first question, which I feel like was the most powerful one for you, was, if she left you tomorrow, would you be okay?
Yeah, that was a...
And I'm curious now, I feel like that's kind of off-brand for you because it assumes like so much codependency.
Yeah.
And I'm curious now, like, what if you were to challenge someone in a forum and ask them 3 questions that would help them get clarity on their relationship? What would several of those questions be?
What a great question. So I'd say the first one is I would rephrase that question to, if they left you tomorrow, would you feel relief? And that doesn't mean that you need to leave a relationship, but it certainly means that you are holding on to a lot of heaviness between you and the other person. And there is probably a lot of unspoken words and conversations that need to happen. You know, whenever anyone asks me, like, how do you know if you stay or go? I mean, there's so many confounding factors to that. The other one I would ask someone is it abandoning yourself, staying or leaving? And that's a good way to just check into it. I mean, we learn to trust ourselves by making decisions. And we only learn how to separate fear and intuition when we make a decision that then clarifies which one it was. So if you make a choice that feels like, maybe I'm just afraid to love this person, but I have this deep guttural sense that I need to leave. Well, then if you leave and then you're like, wait, I value them. They were so great for my life. I need to go back to that. You didn't make a mistake. You just gathered more information and then you went back and now you just learned the difference, a difference between fear and intuition. So I think that would be the next question. I mean, the other question that really rocked me in that was, could someone else love them better? And the follow-up question to that is, because that's true a lot in relationship, is that we take our partner for granted. We forget that we still need to do the concerted, intentional work of loving them. And in that, though, is, you know, if you say, could someone else love them better? And you go, yeah. I mean, the next question is, do you want to be the one who does? And sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a great book called Too Good to Leave, Too Bad to Stay. And it's a psychologist who writes about both the research and her clinical experience. So like, when people answered these 39 questions, said yes or no, here's what happened. And I love that because it separates, like, this is just how it's supposed to work in this measurable research-based way, versus like, we're humans and we're diverse and we're complex. You know, we can't take like, your story is the only way the story works, or this is the way the research works, so now all things must go this way. We know that research is often, it's just a snapshot.
Right.
You know, it's a picture of a moment of time.
Yeah.
And often the people who are doing the research have biases. So again, there's, you know, you can take any research and sort of support the way you want to love.
Yeah.
You know,
there's an Esther Perel quote that kind of hits on that I'm curious to get your perspective on. So she goes, this is from Mating in Captivity, her first book. She says, in truth, we never know our partner as well as we think we do. Even in the dullest marriages, predictability is a mirage. Our need for constancy limits how much we're willing to know the person next to us. We're invested in having him or her conform to an image that is often a creation of our own imagination based on our own set of needs.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree that the model that has been inherited in relationship is, I mean, look at the vows we make, till death do us part. I mean, honor and obey, that one has hopefully gone out the window for most people. I don't think many women are going to say, I promise to honor and obey you. Like, it's so archaic and so patriarchal.
Yeah.
But I think till death do us part is a very fascinating one, because there's something about when we enter the agreement of relationship, or, you know, we get our status changed on Facebook, that all of a sudden we think that now we have them. And honor and obey, till death do us part, what implies in that is that you cannot go. You cannot go at any time because you made this vow. Why are we not making vows to like grow and expand and begin to discover the ever-changing parts of you? If you're reading books and participating in groups like this, we're going to change. What we desire is going to change. Our interests throughout our life change, hopefully, right? Like, we know that is true if we have allowed ourselves to.
Yeah.
And so, Alexandra has a great quote that she talks about how one marriage will be filled with many marriages. To sometimes a different person, but often the same person, changing over and over and over again internally. And with my past relationship, we talked about how, like, our relationship will never be a prison. Like, the truth is that your partner can leave you at any time. And that's when you can actually just acknowledge and hold on to that truth, instead of allowing the fear of the leaving cause you to cling tighter. Then all of a sudden you now have to do the very intentional work of loving them. I think about it every morning, that I would wake up and be like, how do I show up today with the intention, not the expectation, that we will be together? That's so different. And then I started to think about this vow of till death do us part. And I thought, what is this? Is this a mortal death, or is this the death of a self? Just the part of me that chose you when I was, what about the people who wake up at 40 something in marriages that they started when they were 19? Yeah. Like that, for us to say it is a sign of your success and your worthiness to work this out. Who am I to tell you what you need to do with your life? Right. It's such an unfair thing that we judge people because their relationships ended just because of our own fears of our relationships ending. It's our advice then comes from a fear-based space, rather than how do you just get more aligned with you, with truth, whatever that means for you, with freedom. Shouldn't relationships feel free?
Speaking of, are you a Dr. Shefali fan?
I know Dr. Shefali's work. It's not that I'm not a fan. I just haven't dove into her work. When I'm a parent, I'll for sure dive into her work.
So many of the group members know her and Esther are like my two besties.
She is a phenomenal teacher. I've seen her speak a few times.
Yeah. And I've done a handful of her courses, and she has every December, she has a 25% off courses sale, and I go apeshit.
Indeed. Just the shopping cart is packed.
Yes. It's the best. It's so juicy. And she had this quote. I'm going to pull it off here if that's okay.
Let's do it.
Okay. So she says, things we mistake for love, that we need to find it, fall in it, and look for it in one special soulmate. Love is a state of being. Either you are it or you're not. Love is so often measured in transactions. If you do this, then I feel that. Let's not mistake transactionality for love. So many of us depend on our partners for validation and approval. This is dependency, not love. Then when we fall in love, we want them to complete us, to fulfill our every desire. Let us not mistake possession for love. We expect them to stay the same, and when they change or transform, our love ends. This is attachment. What is true love? When you don't own, possess, or seek to control the other in any way, true love doesn't need any conditions to exist. If you are not feeling free in your relationship, it is not love.
100%.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that this idea that love is a guarantee or anything like that. When my relationship ended, I didn't stop loving my partner. I love her just the same. If it's attached to her choice of me, then it's conditional. As where if it's just attached to her being her, that is, I would never want someone to feel like there's something wrong with them, or there's a flaw, or because they can't choose a relationship, or they don't want to be in it. Like, what an imprisonment that is. Yeah,
I agree. I had a really important relationship this year that was a friendship that started out dating and evolved into a friendship. The sexual physical chemistry was really not there for either of us. And yet we had the most fun together, like the most amazing connection. Oh. And he decided that he wanted to start dating again. And because of our emotional intimacy, like really needed to take some space. And I feel the same way. Like, I love him just as much as I did before. And like, think of the moments we shared with just as much like love and gratitude. And I'm grateful that you said, like, you can love someone just as much, even if you're not like in a formal relationship, because I feel like there's so many, relationship experts out there that say, like, my interest in you or my esteem of you is conditional on how much you invest in me, is often like a common refrain.
Yeah. I mean, that's the difference between having standards, which is like one of the standards or requirements to be in a relationship with you is that we are devoted to one another, as opposed to that's not a condition for loving you, because that's where there's such a conflict within ourselves is like if we are in a relationship with someone who is unkind, abusive, anything like that, we love them, but that's so in conflict with how we're being treated. So it's hard for us to intellectualize that or make it make sense, as opposed to seeing that we can love someone and know they're not good for us, right? And that's a difference between having standards about how you want to exist in a relationship and the fact that we all live in this space of unconditional love. It's not about like giving it or removing it. It's about removing access to you, which is a boundary, which is totally different, which is what allows us to trust ourselves to love more, is when we know that we can curate who we are investing in. And which is a different, it's funny because we like think it's attached to, if I love them unconditionally, I would work through this. I would accept this. And people who are prone to codependency, which is most people, or people who have been taught or socialized to give, and people who have experienced trauma or abusive relationships, when they hear that type of message, the mind goes, I need to do more, as opposed to seeing like, no, love is actually, it's about investment and about invitation, but it's not about doing the work for someone else. It's not about taking up the space that you want someone to step into, which is so the way that we often perceive that. It's like, oh, I guess I have to do more. It's like, do less, actually. Do less. Invest in yourself. And then watch as people step towards you.
So Robert Churchill, Andrew Stephen Ross, and Stacey Frazier. I just thought of you in that moment. Sending lots of love.
Lots of love. I don't know you, but definitely sending you lots of love.
Okay. So I want to talk now, question 2.
Question 2.
So I want to talk now about relationship endings. So I know myself and a lot of the folks in the group were really moved by your breakup ceremony. And when I was thinking about it, the only like resource I could really turn to for how to consciously end a relationship is Catherine Woodward Thomas, Conscious Uncoupling. And I was curious if you have come across any other resources as you were planning the ceremony.
Yeah, I Googled it. I just Googled it and I found a number of different articles. And then I also had seen and read Catherine Woodward Thomas's stuff. I had the pleasure of watching her speak. Just an amazing person. And I then sort of put together what I thought might be a good closing ceremony. And then I sent it to Kylie and then asked how she felt about it. And then we just agreed to do it. And then we just added it. I added a section of my breakup course. I added how we did it and what I would recommend. Which is that we made it very ceremonial. We burned sage and then we lit a fire. And then we just got very present first, and it's so mature. Like I've never been through a breakup with such openness.
So that was actually the question that I had around this. So I've had a couple experiences with ghosting, and that process taught me that closure really comes from within.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, it can be so meaningful to have closure with the person. And just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Like what do you think you got out of the experience by having the closure and that like conscious ceremony that you did, that let's say you hadn't had the opportunity and had to have the closure come from within? Like, what is the difference between those two for you?
I've certainly been through a breakup where there was no access to making it make sense, or like finding some level of goodbye. As you said, closure has to come from within, because as soon as you place closure on on a behavior or a condition, then you remove it from your own self. So, you're no longer in the power to create your own closure. With the closing ceremony, not everyone is going to be available or want to do that. And that's their boundary. That's their right. What we can do is we can do the closing ceremony on our own. We can do it in where we set up an empty chair and we imagine them there. We can even switch spots and sort of do a gestalt with ourselves, where we do the closing ceremony and actually change chairs and take on their role. All of these things can produce incredible healing. When you can't get it, I mean, it feels again like we're being robbed of this opportunity. It feels like a deeper experience of abandonment and rejection. And it is. And I would invite in that perspective that is probably an invitation again to save oneself, to sit in that. Because what I have found is that the grief that I have experienced through our relationship, changing containers, has been old grief too, not just endings with her, but just, I think in a lot of ways I've connected to the sadness that is our own mortality, that one day this is not going to be, and that is both beautiful because it makes this moment ever so much more important, but it also is sad because like one day we don't get this, and that's and I think when relationships end, it really actually invites us to explore what is really a death, the death of ourselves. Or when you're connected to your own mortality, you're no longer in the space where you withhold. And I have found so much beauty in that experience. It's terrifying. Don't get me wrong. It's like anytime you go down the chasm of understanding your own mortality, you're like, oh fuck, this is a lot. I'm just gonna have a copy and pretend I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what we do, which is like an existential escapism that we do through love. There's something about loving someone else that makes us feel like we're just a little more connected to this, that it's everlasting. But man, when you can actually connect to the truth of loss, the truth of pain, the truth of breakups, the truth of all endings, well, then you're really alive. Because none of us are promised any moment beyond, but like just knowing that, like why the fuck are we waiting for anything?
Right.
To have a hard conversation, to tell someone you feel disconnected from them, to tell someone you care about them, like why are we waiting? Like, we might get hit by a bus later, and then I won't have said the thing. So I don't ever want to live on withheld anything. Which is different though than learning to contain oneself too. You know what I mean? To not then just go like spill everything out into the world. Right. Which is that idea of like vulnerability versus oversharing.
Right. That makes sense. Last night you had brought up, like on the topic of old grief and our relationship endings bringing up old grief for us, you had brought up the idea of, I don't know if it was your most recent relationship or another one, bringing up for you like this concept of not being chosen. And that's one that I really connect with. In my experience with ghosting, the initial feeling was abandonment. And I was thinking back to like my past, and there are no inklings of that. Like my parents were, so present. And actually this guy that I dated was really my first experience with emotional unavailability. My dad, he's a psychologist, like so in touch with his feelings,
wow,
so comfortable.
You got the real training ground.
Yeah. And so it was really my first experience with it. But I think what it did bring up was like the not being chosen wound.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of interesting and super healing. Like it was, he and I had only dated for a couple months, but it was extremely, I don't want to say traumatic. It really stuck with me. Like it took several years to work through the stuff that it brought up.
Oh, yeah,
and I wouldn't change it for the world. I'm a totally different person now, in the best way. So old grief. So, when you are experiencing triggers in a relationship or the end of a relationship, tap into if the pain that you're feeling is reminiscent of a feeling from maybe it's childhood or a previous unresolved breakup and relationship that you haven't yet processed?
Yeah, I think sometimes too, like what you're speaking of, this rapid escalation of a connection. When we had a lot of trust, that can also be, that we have parents who are really secure and open. We believe the world is secure and open. And then I think there's a sense of trust and openness with our first love, with maybe someone we meet that we're like, oh, green flag, green flag, green flag. And then we're like, that one red one, we just sort of glazed over because there were so many seemingly green flags.
Yeah.
And it is a painful lesson, to experience the fracture of that, because we're so invested, so excited, and then all of a sudden the loss that we like lose the air within ourselves. And then but then what an opportunity to learn a different side, which is that not everyone earns the right to our heart, and where we can look, like I'm sure this is true for you, it's always been true for me, is that whenever I get to a place where I sort of saw it coming, or like felt on a deeper level, but I didn't recognize what that feeling meant yet. When I look back, I'm like, that's what it was.
So glaring, right?
Right.
So glaring.
So then I just think to myself, like, when was the decision moment that I chose to abandon self or to not honor that feeling? Now that I know what the feeling means, which is really what living is about, is about collecting data. Collecting data, especially when we didn't have a lot of data. You didn't have a lot of abandonment data.
None.
Right.
Yeah.
So now you have abandonment data. And it's like ghosting is such a painful thing. And I think if we just like reframe it as, this is, a lot of people are like, this is the worst. They get frustrated by this thought, but I say that it's like someone who's dumping them for themselves, dumping themselves for you, that you all of a sudden have, and it doesn't remove the pain of the experience. It's just to say, like, you were going to break up in the future anyway. So when someone just doesn't show up one day, which I'm not saying like 2 years down the road, that's fucked up.
Right.
And that deserves it. But 3 months in or a month in, I remember going on a couple dates with a woman, maybe like 5 years ago. And it being like, I was like, this is so great. It's so exciting, texting, just fucking gone. Just like, and I remember writing a thing about that, of just like, rejection is the universe saving us from mediocrity, both ourselves and other people, And so it's such a, ghosting is a real doozy though.
Yeah. I often go back to the phrase, people can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. So the person that did it, he's a good guy. Like, he's not an asshole, but he just didn't have the skills, right? He didn't have the ability to face conflict or the ability to even know what was going on in his body. That's the sense I get.
Yeah.
He wasn't an asshole.
It doesn't often come, it almost never comes from a malicious place. It comes from a place of fear of closeness,
right,
and fear of hurting other people, fear of seeing evidence of you hurting other people. Because I think when we ghost someone, we know inherently that we are hurting them, right? But we don't want to be connected to that. So it's sort of like a form of active disassociation.
Yeah, I would agree.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
Even though like literally on the other end of that experience is someone who's like, what the fuck happened to you? Like, where are you? You dick, But it happens.
Yeah. Interesting.
Can tell if there's, okay. Oh.
Yeah. They're love that. Okay, great. Hey, Ingrid.
The trash took itself out. I like that.
Okay. So the angry guy that you love to speak with, angry therapist.
Oh, yeah, John Kemp, the angry guy.
You guys often talk about this concept of beyond the breakers, which is kind of like, if you think of having an intimacy ceiling, it's that next level beyond where that ceiling is. And I'm curious what that will look like for you in your next relationship beyond the breakers.
For me, I think about it being, so just that, knowing, a lot of the research and knowing my own experience. I know Esther talks about this idea that love and desire are at odds, that love wants closeness and desire needs mystery and those things. And I really think that speaks to a construct, which is mating in captivity is really a lot of what I got from it, was this idea that the constructs of relationship actually remove desire, you know, in essence. When they talk about the monkeys, and then when there's more space for the monkey, all of a sudden you see that the female actually is pursuing the male monkey, but when they're in a cage, the male monkey's always initiating sex. So the cage takes away the dance, right? And what I find is that for me, it's not that desire and in essence, desire and closeness are and love are at odds. But for me, it's that the model of relationship is that I lose myself in you, right? Like codependency, patriarchy, all of these models of nuclear family, they're about my identity is not important because I abandon that for the for the relationship. Well, in that, do you ever want to fuck somebody you blame for losing yourself? No, of course not. Because your identity is lost within them. So you don't desire them because you blame them for you being enmeshed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then I think the real dance is about how do I hold on to me and be in love with you, right? Like how do I maintain my own identity so that I create space between you and I? And in this space is the dance of love, is desire, but then of course it's about maintaining, as you were saying earlier about the quote from Esther, that there's the maintaining also this growth so that you're always changing, so that I'm always loving a new version of you, getting to know you on a deeper level. And never forgetting that there's more to know about you. So for me in the honeymoon phase, I mean, I really I like observe those things as they're happening within my relationship. It's like, how do I honor your need for your identity and your dreams and your passions? And how do I honor mine? How do we keep adventure alive? You know, there's a study where they looked at couples who did what they always do. Then they had couples who did date night and they didn't do anything like unique. And then they had couples who did new things and went on adventures. And so that's something that has always been instilled within my experience of relationship rituals is how do we do stuff that is new for you or new for me or new for both of us? What it does is it makes the mind associate your partner with novelty of the experience. So then you keep the honeymoon phase sort of extended. So I'm just always mindful of implementing those of, I think past the breakers is really about when the new love becomes love, right? And in the research, they talk about it becoming like companionate love, that it goes from romantic love to companionate love. There's a study from Helen Fisher. Have you seen her TED Talk, The Brain in Love?
She doesn't really engage me that much, so I tend to start her stuff and then
and she's not the most exciting speaker. She loves to talk about poetry too. She's very much into poetry. But in this study, they took people who had been in relationship, I think on average, I think it's like 22 years, 22.7 or something like that. I forget. But they put them in an MRI machine. These are people that said, I'm still very much in love with my partner. And then they took people who were in the honeymoon phase of their relationship. Same thing. And then they took people who had just been dumped as a control group. And what they would do is they put them all in MRI machines, and then they asked the people who were still in love about their romantic partner. And then they also asked them about a best friend so that they could differentiate romantic love from friend love. And what they saw was that the people who were still in love after 22 years, some of them their second and third marriage, those people, the same parts of their brains lit up as the people in the honeymoon phase. I thought this was so fascinating because we often believe that love has to sort of desire and love in the honeymoon phase has to die and I think that's also part of our sort of cultural narrative. You know, you observe older couples and, you know, I remember being in a hockey change room and I was young, I was like maybe 19 or 20. And one of the guys was like 32 and married. And I remember him being like, if you want to stop having sex, just get married. And I was like, why is this a story that we adhere to? Like instead, but that's also that we just sort of like throw in the towel when we get married or but it's like, keep doing the work, bang on an airplane, you know, keep sex sexy, you know, like it's so interesting how we believe all stories are our story. You know what I mean? That like, if that's what happened to you, that's what's going to happen to me. So that's a long answer to how to keep the honeymoon phase alive. But I think it's about newness and novelty and being interested and asking lots of questions, being curious. I love that idea that you never know your partner. It's so true. And if I face you every day being like, I got to get to know so much, like what a different way to approach you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
How could you not feel loved and desired?
Yeah.
But then also we have to have that, there has to be that polarity that exists in our sexual chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
That there has to be a taker and a takee, and that can switch. Mm-hmm. That there is this masculine, feminine sort of experience that can be both ways.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be male, female.
Right.
It's about the energetic experience.
Yeah. You reminded me of a quote. I'm going to just open my Google Doc that I love so much and see if I can find it quickly.
How many quotes you might have, right?
So freaking many. Oops, I spelled it wrong. Nope.
I feel like Esther has so many quotes. I'm like,
yeah, she really does.
Did you just channel a sage? What happened?
Okay, so the quote is, it's about the connection between creativity and erotic and how connected they are. She says, when you're creative, you are often erotic. You feel alive. Creativity is about going outside of the boundaries. It's about being nonlinear. It's about expansiveness. It's about connecting dots that are not necessarily so obvious and then creating a whole new reality with them. Our erotic imagination actually plays along very similar lines. It takes you outside of your boundaries. It takes you into a reality that often exists only in your imaginary world. You cannot force creativity, just as you cannot force desire. From this place of aliveness, of connecting with the erotic self, flows desire.
That's so right? Beautiful.
Yeah. That was actually from an interview she did, not one of her books.
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I think that whole construct of what relationship used to be and is still in some essence. I know Eli Finkel has that book, The All or Nothing Marriage, and he talks about like marriages of today are more happy than they've ever been. It's just there's fewer of them that are.
Right.
But we used to meet Maslow's lowest needs through marriage, but now we can actually meet self-actualization through relationship. It doesn't have to be marriage. But this idea that when you tell the truth of who you are and how you feel within your relationship, you create desire because it's a form of rebellion to be authentic. And when you tell your partner all the truths that exist between you, then you don't blame them for you being a prisoner of your own truth. So then you desire them. I think of that creativity of the erotic. I think of the same thing of expression. If you actually express the truth, your relationship is no longer a container where you hide. It is actually a container where you're seen, which is so different. You don't want to have sex with people. You don't want to fuck somebody you unconsciously resent and blame for a lack of self-expression. But when you see them as a space where you are safe to self-express, then it changes the erotic too, because now you can say, do that thing to me, twist my nipple, do the thing I want, because now we're in a safe space to create and play and like dance and what it means to be human. We're so terrified of sexuality. It's so fucked up.
Yeah, it really is.
Like we're all the result of at least one orgasm, and yet we're terrified. It's so fucked up to me. Yeah, I said I could go on.
Yeah.
That's
the shame entangled in it. Okay, so folks are enjoying, I think. Great. Container stuff. Okay. So do you know Neil Satin? He hosts the Relationship Alive podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he recently had a relationship ending. His marriage ended. And his marriage had been kind of the impetus for the podcast and a huge part of the podcast. And he did a episode where he shared kind of more on a surface level, because it's still very fresh, his reflections on it. And one of the things he mentioned is staying longer in a relationship that's run its course, he talked about staying longer, like past its expiration date, in a relationship that had run its course because you both so value like relational skills and doing the work and relationship.
Yeah.
Can you relate to that at all?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we just have such a deep love for one another. And, when you're using the tools and having all the hard conversations, and even in the conflict, you're experiencing such love and such safety and such openness, and just to see the depths of her human experience as I had my own. There's a line when I look back and I see a certain level of abandonment of self, which I wouldn't change because it was at this risk or this possibility that that is what love does. It believes in the possibility of something and invests in that, and then it gathers data and it goes, okay, there was actually a line there where maybe both of us should have parted. We parted at the perfect time to know that now, you know, like that's how I look back, is like the next sort of step was we both went to an intensive psychotherapy weekend together as a couple with the therapist. And it was amazing. I wouldn't change that. It was like exactly what we needed to get to the place. But then of course you're left with looking back, and it's so easy to do. Had it worked out and it'd be different, then I would be maybe telling a different story, right?
Yeah.
You know, then it isn't self-abandonment. Right. It's actually the right decision.
The breakers.
Exactly. So there were many breakers within our relationship. There's always a deeper level of intimacy that's possible. And, you know, I think sometimes we forget that relationships can end with really great people too. You know, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting observation. Okay, so segue to surfing.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, what drew you to it, and if there are parallels to living on the edge for you, like if embodying this kind of, I don't know, I've never surfed, so I don't know but I imagine it's kind of scary.
It is terrifying. I have to admit, maybe not to like good surfers, but to me, it's terrifying. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, so I always wanted to get good at surfing. I think I just really admired how careless or carefree surfers are. They have cool hair, you know, they just didn't give a shit. And I think I was sort of drawn to that, like, risk taking, especially how powerful the ocean is. You know, you are really in a state of surrender because you don't know what the next rogue wave might look like. And I really went deep back. I was never a great surfer. I wouldn't qualify myself as a great surfer now, but I wanted in 2019 to become a reasonable surfer. I was a snowboarder and a soccer player and all those things, but I made that my goal in 2019. In June, I went to Tofino for 2 weeks and I took lessons, and I just did it every day. And after my breakup, I went back to Tofino in October, September, and did the same thing. And what I love about it is you are so present to the moment, you cannot not be. Because if you are not, then you will crash. No problem, for certain. Yeah. So you have to be in flow, you have to be in the moment, and you have to be present to only what's happening, not the dialogues of the past or the future. And so these flow states are so easily accessible within that. Also, there's that state of surrender. So for me, I also get the same feeling hiking, where I'm in a vista or in the middle of a forest, that I feel so connected to so much more than me. And when I feel that connection to so much more than me, then there is a sense of trust and surrender to the story that is unfolding within me. That, you know, it's like everything else within nature doesn't think about like, oh, that tree next to me fell down and like my one branch fell off, or, you know, like they don't think about that, they being everything within the constructs of life, but we do. And I think it's such a constant reminder to be brought back to that if you are intentional about presence and expansion, your own growth, then you are, you know, you don't leave your life up to fate. That's not what I'm saying, is that you give your chance to meet fate. You give your chance to meet the possibilities of your life by continuing to learn what has flowed through you. Do you know what I mean? And then we just trust that in the endings of things or the struggles of things, that there is a greater thing being born of us. And that's what sort of has kept, like, as my relationship ended, I never was glim about a future. I just didn't know what it looked like, you know, because now it's changed form for sure, because it's not her, possibly, right? So it's like, even in that is like, is it possibly, it might be her, but if I hold on to the idea that we're getting back together, then I miss any possibility of someone loving me in the future who's not her, right? So I have to be mindful of all these stories that play within myself. So surfing just brings me back always to this, like, allow the lessons of today to be today, the ones of yesterday to be and the ones of the future to come. But when we allow today and now just to be, then we're not, so easy to fucking go back there and be like, oh, if I change this, or what happens will be here. It's like, just point yourself in that direction, make the choices that make you likely to get there, be a good human, live with grace and kindness. I think everything pretty much fucking works out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe my life will look completely different than I think. I mean, I used to be a pharmaceutical rep. I never thought I'd be on a Facebook Live one day with you, right?
Yeah.
I didn't meet you till not that long ago, and it was digitally.
Yeah.
You know, life's fucking miraculous. It's crazy. You could meet your person or have a conversation with your person and your life be completely transformed and your relationship go in a complete transformative direction. Right? Like, we don't know.
Right.
We don't know.
I don't know.
We have no idea how all this works.
Yeah.
When someone's like, oh, yeah, you can just think about a thing and then it becomes a thing. We've all seen that. You've thought about someone, they call you, you're like, that's fucked up.
Yeah. I do think you make a really important point, though, about finding an activity that puts you in flow and brings you to the present. I think, maybe more risk adverse than you are. So, like, snowboarding and surfing,
yeah, I get that.
Not my jam. But when I dance, there's something that is so powerful and really brings me to the present. I notice that when I'm in my head, I get like totally off the beat, not doing the right choreography. And that's like a signal to me, like, stay in the moment, you know, you're not being present. And it's really powerful to find those activities that do that for you. So it's going to be different things for different people, but find your flow.
There's a great book called Stealing Fire.
Okay.
And it is about flow states that you can find them through activity, through sex, through psychedelics, through Burning Man, through tons of different things.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool book.
There's another book by an author that I can never remember how to pronounce his name. Do you know the one called Flow? It's by, he's like Russian.
By Mikhail. Oh, his last name is so hard to say. He, a good friend of mine is doing a PhD program with him. He's a positive psychologist out of California. Yeah, I forget. Shuvaresky or something. I forget. We fucked it up. Sorry. If he's watching, which he probably isn't.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I tried to read that one. It was pretty dry.
Yeah, he's a pretty academic dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not so much my style.
He's not keynoting conferences for a reason, I'm sure. I'm sure. No offense if you're watching this. Know our strengths.
Yeah, you have to. Okay, what's something that people would be surprised to learn about you?
Oh, man. I'm so transparent about everything. I'm trying to think of something that I haven't shared. Well, you'd be surprised to learn about me. I'm really competitive, like in sports. I don't know if that's a surprise for people.
I think that's surprising a little.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, in sports, I like to talk trash.
Okay.
I am very competitive. I love winning, which don't bring that skill to your relationship. But, you know, like formally when I'd come home and be like, oh, from soccer, I grew up playing soccer. Guy would be like, oh, how's your game? It's not like I would just say if we won or lost. Right. It was that's like the rest of it was fun. More fun if we won. Less. So I'm really competitive. Board games, true too. I have to check myself a lot because I like want to win and I like competition, which I think has made me good at things, like made me put in more effort than a lot of people would put in something. And very intentional about the things I do. So when I like make a choice, it's already done. Yeah. It's like I'm doing that thing. Yeah. So I think that maybe that's it. I can't think of anything else. I've pretty much excised all my shame in my writing. So I don't really have anything that I haven't shared. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So what's an aspect of being a quasi-public figure that is hard for you, or that you, like it's part of the journey that you're on, but it's not something that you necessarily like look forward to?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine being a stare. Because, man, she's like, everyone recognizes her. I think there's, you know, part of the privilege of being able to share what you think, what you go through. I mean, that's such an honor, is that you, in some level, exchange anonymity for that. You know, and maybe that's why actors make so much money, because really they're exchanging their whole anonymity, and there's a privilege to privacy.
For sure.
Yeah, and I dance in that line of like, you know, I think one thing that is just the price of admission of the work that I do is one is that I sign up for a certain level of transparency, right? Like that is inherent in my work. The other side is that, you know, like as I was going through my breakup, I didn't share it for about 3 weeks because there was a level of like, I need to tell everybody, but they don't have the right to the information yet. And so where other people might take 2 or 3 months and then share it, for me, there's such a level of desired authenticity in my work that I actually can never contain a truth that I'm holding on to. Like it is required for me that I share it. But man, it is such a privilege to not have to do that, to like actually go into a cave and, you know, do the thing. For me, I think a lot of my processing comes from self-expression too.
Yeah.
And then also, you know, like I published a podcast where I sob in the podcast. I never would have thought I would ever do something like that. But I think just the line of what is authentic or what is okay to share just keeps moving for me. You know, it's, I don't know that there is a line anymore. I mean, I'm sure there is. There's some things, you know, it's not like I share my Google history with everybody, you know, but Google has all that data. But, you know, I think there's an aspect that is challenging is that I don't always give myself the room to be human, you know, in that like when I make a mistake, I go down the shame train and then it's like, but I'm supposed to know this or I'm supposed to. So I'm constantly reeling back and being reminded of how hard it is to be a person. So I think that might be it. It's like,
that's interesting.
Like where I
expected you'd say.
Well, where someone puts you on a pedestal and like really my work is to take me off of that, so that as soon as you put someone on a pedestal, you remove the possibility of you becoming like them because you've made yourselves not equal.
Right.
And so whenever anyone pedestals me, I'm quick to be like, don't. Oh my God, I'm just a person who has invested time into learning a certain skill set more than someone else because I've had the privilege of being able to do that.
Yeah.
What do you expect that to say?
I anticipated that you would say like the burden of constantly having to give, like people every time they approach you, it's like they need advice or validation or something from you.
Gotta have boundaries.
Yeah.
You know, I definitely have a lot more digitally. Like I don't reply to everybody. I can't. There's just not a possibility. My breakup has really, because I don't have the energy to overextend myself, I've just had to have. But I also have, you know, a really amazing team. So yeah, I am filtered from a lot of things, you know, where they don't give me every email I get because I can't possibly hold all of the things I read about of the human experience that like literally I feel the pain of them. I'm sure everyone in this group can relate to that. If you're in this group, you probably have people coming to you for relationship advice because you obviously are learning it. So it's so easy. I think healers or people who just share and desire to help people are inherently codependent, you know, like that's the nature of the work is that you are giving. So part of the healing of ourselves is in actually inviting someone to step towards, like, I can't heal the world. It's not my job, you know? But man, of course, the egoic mind would be like, I would love to be no, fuck that shit. Like, I don't have the energy. You don't have the energy, you know? So it's like, you look at any type of work, like over workplace exhaustion as nurses, doctors, like if you don't design your own life, someone else will do it for you and you will not like what they come up with. I promise that. So that's this opportunity for people who are givers, empaths, to actually contain oneself, to take a step back. Like boundaries are not just about protecting, they're also about containment. And so it's me being able to say, like, I actually don't have anything to give to you, but I'll write and I'll share videos and I'll do it in a safety space, you know. But if I was doing it where everyone could always interact with me, like I've done less Instagram lives because I just don't have the energy for them. So I have to honor that.
Yeah.
If I don't, I'll lose my mind, you know? So I know there's like a cost to not honoring myself. I feel abandoned by myself.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like it's had the opposite effect where some people could get wrapped up in feeling really like invaded Whereas for you, the exposure to it has helped you create boundaries.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The like depletion of my emotional resilience
Yeah.
has like removed me from being able to be around energy vampires. Anyone who's like trying to get from me without like an agreement, I can feel, and it's like I don't have energy for it. So it's like I have no choice but to have a boundary. It's like my body's been like, you better fucking put a boundary up or you're fucked. Yeah. And then I got a cold. So there's
I love it. Okay. Complete the sentence. When I let people love me, they.
Like, you want me to complete it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, when I let people love me, they leave. I'm trying to think of like what's my modern narrative of that, because that has evolved. Yeah, it's they leave. They don't choose me. Yeah, and that's been the dance. What about you?
Kind of similar, maybe a little more dramatic though.
I love dramatic.
Yeah, that they're super interested and we have an amazing connection, and then they suddenly leave.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like mine with my most painful relationships has been that there's this moment of choice and they don't choose it. And I've realized through my own work on choosing unavailable people is that I thought I'd nailed it. I thought I'd like had, my previous partner had been divorced and done a lot of work on herself, and she's more avoidant. I'm more anxious. I know how to stand in security, and I know how to observe, trauma versus truth. But for sure, there was still unavailability that was like masquerading, and it's not like any of us are ever fully healed or fully, that's, I think we can always do more work, and that's the truth of always being a student. And I think I unconsciously missed some unavailability, which is with no regret. Yeah. Because of course it's exactly what I needed to learn. But the first thing because I had a list of all the things I want in a relationship, and the first thing I added to my list, which none of this is about her. She is the most spectacular human. But the first thing I added to my list was capacity for a mutual level of devotion. And having been someone who was like constantly inviting to the next level of the relationship or I realized that Harriet Lerner talks a lot about this, but this idea of over-functioning and under-functioning, that we are either an over-functioning partner, which you might see as empathic, codependent, and an under-functioning partner who feels like they need to do the work. They're the ones who are holding back. So both people's identities are framed in the roles we play in the relationship. And so I observed how much of my identity was still in this. I mean, look at my work, right? It's like over-functioning, right? Yeah. So that's why I constantly check myself with, if you over-function or try to get them to do the work, or try to do the work for them, book the appointments for them, put the book under their pillow, hoping they'll read it. Oh, this podcast just happens to be on while we're driving. I got you in the car for an hour. You're going to listen to this shit. When we do that, we take away the space for them to step into. And I see so much where I was complicit in everything that happened. And it's never one way. It's always two people in a dance. And so I just step into the responsibility of what I was complicit in. Yeah. So when I let people love me, they love me and choose me. That's what's fucking happening now. Right?
I love it. What's the greatest compliment you've ever received?
Every time I get that I am who I am from what they perceive. So when, that who I am when I write or speak or share is who I am when people meet me. That's a compliment to me, because for me, I shared that quote from Ram Dass last night. That is, I hope I live with the integrity
Mm-hmm.
that the truths that live within me are manifest in the truths that express outside of me.
Mm-hmm.
And when they are not, every message I give is a mixed message, one of both love and fear.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, my work and my life has constantly been this like new truths, express truths, new learning, express.
Mm-hmm.
And when I hold on to something that is
Mm-hmm.
true for me and I don't express it, I feel out of integrity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it'd be like if I write about love and kindness and, you know, all these things. And then I was saying yesterday at the talk that I was caught a red eye last week, and I was so tired. And a guy budged in front of me on the plane, and I was like, but it was like, find grace, right?
Yeah.
And it was such a moment of choice, like, who do I want to be? How do I want to live? Which is, if I did lose it, which I don't think I've ever done, but if I did happen to be reactive, which I have been, or like sharp, that I could then look back with grace and be like, that's a moment for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I like that. Okay, if you could see any two relationship experts go head to head, like debate style, who would you pick?
Oh man, that's good. I just like seeing Terry Real do anything.
Yeah.
I love Terry Real, and he's so sharp.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think I'd really like to see Sue Johnson and Esther Perel talk, because for some reason I feel like, not that Esther is, I've never seen her express anything about attachment theory or anything like that, but I've seen Sue Johnson sort of allude to, or not necessarily, like the idea of relationship exploration outside of a very structured model is threatening to attachment. And so I'm fascinated how those two, I don't know that they would actually debate each other because they're both graceful people,
Yeah.
but I think it would be an interesting conversation, because both sort of, I mean, I see the absolute merits of attachment theory. I mean, you can't argue it. It like affects your nervous system and your vagal nerve, and then your inflammation, and then causes disease. So there's a direct correlation to conflict and your nervous system.
Yeah.
And all the data points to that increase in leaky gut, which causes inflammation, autoimmune, lifespan, all of these things, and relationships having stability and dependability. You know? And so I'm fascinated how that conversation will go.
That's interesting. I feel like I have heard Esther speak about it. I can send you some links.
Yeah, I would love to
the talks.
I think it'd be great to see them moderated.
Oh yeah.
And to have, but they're both so graceful. I don't know, but Terry, he'd be great to see, because he'll speak truth.
Yeah.
Not that they wouldn't, but I just mean he's very direct.
Yeah.
Oh man, every time I see Terry Real talk, I'm like, this fucking guy. He is
he's a character.
Just sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on my podcast, and that episode is one of my favorites.
It was a great episode.
Yeah, he's so good.
Okay, so we're getting to the end.
All right.
So the 5 love languages. I'm curious, what's a love language that's not included in the original 5 that's really meaningful for you?
That's not included in the original 5.
Like if you were going to add a 6th, what would it be?
I think it would be both mine. I think it would be more a core value. It would be growth.
Interesting.
You know what it might be is, like I'm trying to think of it as a love language, would be humility. The experience of humility. But I'm trying to think of how, maybe empathy could be a love language. Like the fact that you are empathic to my experience is how I feel loved by you.
Yeah.
Hey, that's a good love language, that I feel understood.
Yeah.
That I at least feel seen.
Yeah.
I can't put your understanding of me in your hands, but that I feel seen and loved for my truth, even if it's in conflict with yours. So empathy.
Like holding space a little too.
Yeah. Yes. Just the space to be myself. That is a great love language. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's a great translation. Yes, that's it.
I like it.
The space to be seen. I was listening to a talk yesterday. I think it was Ram Dass, and he was saying that kindness is an act to another. Compassion, being compassionate, is to experience someone else's suffering, right? And be compassionate towards it. And he said that we move from kindness to being compassionate to compassion is. And that is the moment where your suffering is my suffering. That you suffering means I suffer too. And I think that really is this, when you look at the research on romantic relationships and when you look back and you go, okay, what are the two qualities in a romantic partner that determine at the end of life whether your relationship was good? And it is kindness and generosity. I believe that's the Gottman's research. Anyways, there's two things that I've seen in the evolution of the models of relationship that I think are important to add to that. One is just an endless amount of curiosity, just to be curious about oneself, about one's partner. And I think humility is such the openness to being wrong, the openness to being flawed, the openness to have things to work on. Those to me are, I actually think, because you find grace and kindness and generosity just by embodying humility and curiosity. And I really think that to me is the ultimate. It's like when I've been open to my partner telling me the truth about how I'm experienced by the world and friends and parents or whatever, it has caused so much more expansion in me than anything else. And I really think that is what continues to keep love alive, and continues to keep love alive within ourselves, because we love ourselves for being open to seeing that we are human and make mistakes and can grow.
I like it. I feel like mine are a little more superficial.
What are yours?
So mine are, if someone, not just that they're funny, but they know exactly how to make me laugh. Like they know me so well, they know what will make me laugh. That makes me feel really loved. I think
because laughing isn't, it's not mentioned as a love language. I guess it could be implied in quality time or words of affirmation. No,
that's
I like,
I
like that. Because humor is also one of the greatest qualities for dissolving conflict when it's not used as a way of distracting from conflict. Because I was a master at that one. Like, let's laugh and pretend we didn't just have that hard conversation.
I'm just thinking of a personal story that involves humor in a moment of massive conflict that was really great.
Right, it just dissolves things, and then we are like, haha, oh, it hurts, but we are alive.
And the second one is like, if someone shares content that they know will be really meaningful for me, like a podcast or a book, and it is, I feel like very, like they know me so well and they really like love me.
Oh okay. That they know you well, so there's in being seen, in like and then a gift coming from
Jana, you're really good at that, my friend Jana. There was a quote I heard recently, and I want to get your thoughts on it. It's by Tony Robbins. I imagine you might not resonate with him entirely, but
you know what? I do love his work.
He's
in quite a fire right now. But I do love his work.
Passion in a relationship is commensurate with the amount of uncertainty you can tolerate.
Compassion is is commensurate with the amount of that speaks to Esther's thoughts too. I mean, if you acknowledge that you don't know everything about your partner, you immediately experience uncertainty. So I can understand that the tolerance that you have for uncertainty, which is also the tolerance you have for your own uncertainty about your own mortality, about the future of your life, about how a conversation will go that you've never had. Every time you live on the edge of what you know that you're growing. And tolerating uncertainty is fascinating because, of course, there's a level of uncertainty that we spill over and it creates insecurity. Or there's a level of uncertainty that we can't tolerate because we are insecure. And I do agree with that. I think that just that mystery that lives all the time in another person is enough to create a lot of fire. It's odd though that through the prison that we've created in relationship, that we just stop doing the work. We stop being curious. We stop not only discovering ourselves, but discovering another person. It's so easy to forget about oneself.
Yeah.
So easy.
Yeah.
And so easy to forget about the mysteries that lie in the pain of our partners or people around us. I guess that just reminds us, as I'm reading in these comments too, just to be, you know, ever so curious, to be ever so, you know, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. That means so much to me. Having these conversations, though, is like what it's all about.
It is.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think, if anything, I hold on so tightly to my independence and individuality that it could potentially like get in the way of connection. Like I so value, you know, who I am, that, you know, it's a dance, right?
And that's that, you know, all of the system, or all of the social narratives and media and socialization that have taught women to be independent, because we have also seen so many women, and men too, lose themselves within a relationship. You know, we like watch as divorces happen and the structure of a breadwinner family left so many people abandoned, so many women abandoned, and then the children of those women observing this. And so boys and girls both never wanting to have to depend on someone, never wanting to experience the pain their parents experienced. And I know I'm speaking from a female focus. That happened to men too. It's just much more rare in that relationship structure. And of course, in the nuclear family, the breadwinner family, there was an inherent abandonment of self to go work at a factory for 100 hours a week. You know, so then both people have an experience of losing oneself for the relationship, which is evolution. I mean, that's what we did in tribes, and that's what we still do a lot of the time. So in the context of how do I hold on to me and be in love with you? I mean, that's the whole, that's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, how do you know when what you have is a boundary versus a wall? You know, and we only know that by opening it up or closing it down. And if we feel like we are in some form of loneliness or isolation, or we don't feel fully seen, or it comes from a place of fear of closeness, like when I let people in, when I am no longer independent, what happens? You know, and that idea of interdependence we've moved from loss of self-abandonment to a culture that does celebrate selfishness and pursuit of self, which is good, but at a pole it's not. Both at extremes, I'm like, where's the screen? Both at extremes are not. And so it's always this dance in the middle. And that's a dance that we have to learn. Boundaries.
Everywhere.
That's the best way.
Okay, so final question.
Final question.
So before the surprise, there's a surprise.
Shit.
So as you think ahead to 2020, what is one word that captures the intention that you have for the year?
Connection. And that for me means, through this relationship ending, I have been I've reeled back into myself. There's been a real discovery of more and more layers. There's been I don't know if it's a spiritual component, but I feel like I'm feeling much more connected to everything than I ever have. I thought I was, you know, but when I walk into, I spend a lot of time in the forest hiking. I like to be in the rainforest because there's just sort of fireworks always going off in a dance of life. There's an ecosystem and a symbiosis and a circadian rhythm that can't be denied when you're watching it unfold in front of you. And for me, it has been about now connecting on a deeper level to how am I part of that? And what is my role in that? You know, like we're not here by accident. So it's like, how can I create or serve this planet, our species, but this planet, to be part of that symbiosis? How do I, you know, as I spoke about yesterday, the story of a butterfly, like how do I do the thing I'm here to do, and what does it mean? What is unfolding? I feel like my work is changing. And instead of getting in the way of that or being afraid of that, just declaring it. And so I think I'm just getting to know myself more, which feels really great. What about you?
My word? It's funny. So one of the Dr. Shefali courses that I got, it's really expensive. And so I was like waiting for
the 25%.
Yeah. So it's called the Year of Manifestation.
Yeah.
So her first course, they're always 52-week courses, and they're about an hour each week. So it's a commitment.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That is a real, that's a class.
So the first one was called Year of the Awakened Heart. And it was kind of just about consciousness and self-awareness. This course I'm doing now is called Year of Manifestation. And I didn't get it. I didn't get the course with a very clear picture of something that I wanted to manifest.
Yeah.
But I was listening to it this morning, and she was talking a lot about using nature as an example of, so often we have this clear vision of our lives and we try to control it. And nature it just is abundant, and it just does its thing. And she talks about kind of taking a lesson from nature and stop trying to have external things shape our sense of this is good or this is bad versus this just is.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm sure.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because we create those constructs of good and bad.
Yeah. So I'm sure as I dive deeper into the course.
What's the word?
The word is
2020. Here you come.
I mean, unattachment feels kind of, I don't know.
Feels good.
No, it feels a little bit emotionless. I want a word with a little more emotion.
Unattachment. What is the goal of unattachment?
I think being present to what's unfolding, flow kind of.
So maybe presence.
Yeah,
flow.
Presence. I like presence. Yeah.
Sweet. I like presence.
Yeah. So, okay, why don't you share how people can connect with you, the courses you have going on?
So you can find me at Create the Love on Instagram. I have a Facebook page too, which is just under my name, Mark Groves. I have a podcast called the Mark Groves Podcast. And I so appreciate this group. I heard that there was rumblings about what I was doing on here, and that was such an honor, especially to be among Esther's work. So I really appreciate the support of the people in the group and any conversations, and to get to be part of this conversation just means a lot. I have a course on breakups called the Breakup Recovery Course, and that is about taking people through the 5 stages of grief. But I also created it in a way that as you're breaking, you're opening. And so it's about actually getting to know who you are in that space and what really matters to you and where you left yourself and what is the real truth of how you show up in a relationship and how the other person showed up. And that one comes with a daily video in your inbox. And I just made it so that you're supported through that, because I know that process. I know that process quite well. I created it in May, and then I deepened it in September. And I added the closing ceremony. And then the other course I have is on boundaries. It's 2 weeks, and it is a freaking deep dive into why don't you have any? What are they? How do you get some? What do they look like? What do they sound like? How do you implement them? Where do you need them? And that one, man, I spent so much time building that, because for me, I think the boundaries, if you have good boundaries, you have a good life. Literally everything will follow. I really feel you can take, when I think about my own inner work, if you have good boundaries, you build self-trust. It just feels like everything else follows. I don't know if I had ever taken a boundaries course first, I would probably be deeper and more interested in other things like conscious communication and things like that. But man, as a building block, I say often that we're already whole, and what boundaries do is they just preserve wholeness. And I think that's the best skill. I don't care if you take my course, I'm saying go learn boundaries. The book by Anne Catherine, Boundaries Where You End and I Begin, is really good. Codependent No More is a great book to if you want to get kicked in the face with a book, that's a good book to get kicked by, because it's you're fuck, I am codependent. People don't like that word. We love the word empath, which is really any empath without boundaries is codependent. It's just a sexier way of not acknowledging the truth.
Yeah.
You
have a great quote on boundaries that I'm going to pull up. can't remember where you said it.
You remind me so much of me, like this.
I'll repost
Quote,
it.
unquote.
Do you remember saying this? Boundaries without consequences are just invitations to be walked all over. We so often mistakenly think if I lay a boundary and you honor it, then I'm worthy of being loved and respected. But really, it's the act of laying the boundary that communicates to the self that we are worthy of being loved and respected by others. In that act, we build our self-worth.
That's right. And it's a symbiotic relationship. There's a leap where you go from not having self-worth. And that is the most courageous leap of all, is to say, I've never had a boundary. I've never felt worthy of this, of a no, of a fuck this, of a no more. And when we get depleted and brought to these spaces, we might not even know our rage. We might be afraid of those things. The first time we do it, and it could be like, I don't want to go to lunch. It can be a simple thing, in that is a deposit into self-worth. And then from that space of the deposit is then born more boundaries. Another way to cultivate self-worth and boundaries, a beginning way, if that feels too scary, is to just keep a promise to yourself every day, a small promise. I'm going to make my bed. That enough is a way of saying, like, I keep my word. Boundaries, man, they are. Where did I say that? In a course? In a video?
I think I'm a podcast person. It was probably in a.
God, you're good.
It was probably in a podcast. Yeah.
And I'm going to have to grab that.
Yeah. Okay. So, you've said a couple times, like, our time is the most precious resource we have. And I really feel that. I tend to be, I would say, on the stingier side with my time. So,
boundaries. Boundaries.
So, it's a Sunday morning and you could be doing anything, and you chose to share yourself and your wisdom with all of us. And I'm deeply grateful. And so I recently came across this journal. Have you heard of Lavina and Caleb?
No.
Okay. So they're a Brooklyn-based couple. So Caleb was doing an Everyman men's group, and it met in Lavina's building. And, every time he'd, like, after the men's group, he'd come downstairs and he was, like, cracked open, and he would talk to Lavina, and, like, Lavina was really turned on by it because he was so, like, open and expressive. And I think he was maybe a little on the shyer side. So she made the first move, and long story short, they're now a couple.
That's so cool.
And I heard them on an Everyman podcast, and they had this practice that they started where every time they had sex, they would journal about it independently and then share something that came up for them with their partner.
Ooh, that's so cool.
Super cool. And then they did a Kickstarter campaign last year and came up with this beautiful journal called a sex journal for couples. And it was funny because I had a friend's wedding, and I'm like, oh, this is such a good wedding gift. So I got it for them.
Yeah.
And then, I was looking at it before giving it to them, and it's just so thoughtfully done. So they have, the introduction is really nice. It kind of like sets the stage. They have 4 agreements. We own our own experiences. They talk about I
like
statements. Yeah, they talk about we're on the same team, choosing to be curious, practice not performance. They have some, like, guided questions if you're not sure, like, what to write about. And they have they share some of, like, what they journaled about. And they have this interesting tool called the heart meter, which allows for kind of openness and honesty, like on a scale of 1 to 5, feeling like disconnected versus connected, which I thought was kind of cool. So I wanted to give one to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can't wait to find someone to have sex with. Yeah. This is going to be, this is part of my 2020 intention.
Right.
To reopen my heart. No, keep it open.
And I also, I had Toy Story gummy bears earlier this week, and I know
I love gummy bears.
So for your travels.
It's so thoughtful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for both of these.
Yeah.
So appreciative. And thank you to all of you. Very grateful to just be able to do this. I mean, this is a dream I didn't even know I'd have. So thank you.
Yeah. So I'll go back and respond to some of the questions and whatnot. And if folks want resources linked up, I'll put them up. But so good to connect with all of you and see these beautiful faces. I know some of the folks here are doing your courses. I think Andrew and Robert both are.
And others and Robert and anyone else who's doing it. Thank you for entrusting me with that beautiful work.
Love it. Okay. With that, have a great weekend and join us on December 18th for our interview with Connor in New York.
Oh, awesome. Connor's amazing. Make sure you attend that one.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, everyone.